Hello, I'm W.P. Edmondson and welcome to Focus. Freedom often causes unbelievable silence. Well, we are into the Christmas season, and of course we would wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from JCTV and Focus. We have with us today two individuals that have been very active in the community with Faith Voices for Jefferson City, and would like to have them, at least give them an opportunity to share a little bit about themselves and the work that they've been doing for the past few years. And we will start with you, Carolyn.
Yes, my name is Carolyn Soche from Immaculate Conception Parish in Jefferson City. And I became involved with Faith Voices primarily because I did a lot of teaching of scripture in the Catholic diocese. And every time I worked with the prophets, there was this one line in Micah that said, "Live justly, love tenderly, and walk humbly." And the more I spoke about justice, the more I realized I needed to be actively involved in the work of justice. And then someone invited me to be part of Faith Voices. Well, it wasn't called Faith Voices then yet, but to be involved in the justice work in the Jefferson City community. And it is quite a vocation for me.
Michelle?
I'm Reverend Michelle Scott Huffman, pastor of Table of Grace Church, and I'm actually a staff organizer with Faith Voices for Jefferson City. And much like Carolyn, I can't separate my faith calling from a call to justice and equity in our communities. As a pastor, I deal frequently with folks who live below the poverty line and struggle with systems of injustice day in and day out. And I watch the way that holds people down from being able to be the people that God created them to be. And so I became involved with Faith Voices for Jefferson City because I believe that if we all band together, working even past our differences in doctrine and all the things that are different about our churches and congregations, there's so much that we can agree on, that we can work on together to make this a more just and equitable place.
Well, since you all have shared, I will share a little bit about my venture into social justice. I was a lay person in Second Baptist Church, formerly president of the NAACP, and my pastor, Pastor Cornell Sutter, asked me to represent Second Baptist Church with a group that were coming into Jefferson City out of Kansas City. And so as a result of that, I began to meet with local faith groups, faith leaders in Jefferson City. And it has been a very rewarding experience. I never thought that I would ever come close to becoming a minister, but the Lord works in mysterious ways. And I have shared with many that the Lord has a very strange sense of humor. I had been running from the ministry for about 3 or 4 years, and he set me at the table with all these ministers. And so in 2013, May the 12th, 2013, I gave in and said, okay, Lord, use me. And so I preached my first sermon, October 2013. But it has been a tremendous experience to work with people of faith who not only preach their faith and read the scripture, but they're willing to really do the word and not just speak it.
I would add one short piece that having grown up in the Catholic faith tradition and having worked primarily with Catholics all my life until my involvement with Faith Voices for Jefferson City. And I have met so many other wonderful people in the other churches that are so committed to the work of justice that it stirs an energy within me also. Yeah. So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that Faith Voices have had an opportunity to work on over the past few years, especially this past year. Let's talk a little bit about one of our initial ventures was payday lending. That has been a tremendous work of ours and continues to be. Carolyn, can you say a little bit about payday lending?
Well, there are two things I found out quickly, that there are, in this community of Jefferson City, more than 17 payday loan operations. And one time, about a year and a half ago, we heard a woman give a testimony about how the payday loan industry, with the loans that she accumulated, sunk her into such a trap that she said, I did not even sleep at night. I did not know how much money I owed, and I felt this kind of oppression. And I think few people understand. You know, we get a bill in the mail from a credit company, and it's like 18% or 12%, or we get charged a late fee, and we become a little bit angry about how much they charge, so we try to pay on time. These people in the state of Missouri, the people can be charged in a payday loan as high as 1,950%. I mean, 1,950%. And that's an average yearly rate. But the many places in the community charge easily about 400%. If you think about what happens to people when they make one payday loan and then they can't pay that back, and they end up on a track of a sense of defeat because the loans just mushroom and they find themselves somewhat helpless. I know that one woman that we worked with, Marilyn DeFeo from Samaritan Center, actually took her personally and worked with her through the loans. And we heard back, she owed about $7,000, by the way. And Marilyn DeFeo worked with her, and and she came back to us about 6 months later and testified that she was able to sleep at night, and she could see some light in the tunnel that had been her life for a long time. I will tell you also one other very good news, that there is an individual who is just now speaking to has come to Faith Voices for Jefferson City and is interested in setting up a shop for payday loans that would not be charging the exorbitant rates, but instead be making the loans at 36%. And you know and he is very, very optimistic that this could drive the other business away who are really predators on the people who are poor. I will tell you also that it was so discouraging last year when we had all the signatures necessary for the payday loan initiative. I mean, the limiting payday loans at 36% was going to be on the ballot, and then somehow the lobby industry intercepted the effort of hundreds of volunteers throughout the state. So the journey continues, and our resolve is just as strong as before.
Michelle, could you tell us a little bit about, here recently, we also have worked on Medicaid expansion. Faith leaders throughout the state came into Jefferson City to lobby legislators in an effort to get them to pass Medicaid expansion. Could you share a little bit about Medicaid expansion, where we are, and where you think we will possibly be going this coming year?
Sure. Well, I'm hopeful. I believe in a great big God that I think is going to help us accomplish something that we haven't been able to accomplish on our own just yet. I think we've got some momentum built up and heading toward the expansion of Medicaid to folks in Missouri who make up to 138% of the federal poverty level. For us, this is a moral imperative. For us, this is a faith issue, not just an economic issue or a health access issue. For those of us who are part of Faith Voices for Jefferson City, we, again, can't separate our faith in God and our desire to have God's people be healthy and live lives that are abundant and well. In Missouri, we do a really good job of taking care of our kids. So several years back, we worked hard to make sure that all children had access to Medicaid if they didn't have other health insurance. And we've done a really great job of implementing that program and making sure that those children do have access to equitable health services. What we find, though, is that children who live in families with parents who aren't covered by health insurance or Medicaid or something of the sort themselves often aren't as healthy as they could be. So while we're caring for the children in our communities, it sort of falls on us to also care for the adults in those children's lives, to make sure that the parents raising the kids that we've done so well taking care of are also able to be healthy and to participate in the workforce in our economic system and to be able to really thrive and to be healthy. As far as where we are with that right now, we had some things moving in the legislative session at the end of last year. Folks may remember a day when there was a bit of a ruckus in the Senate gallery, and there was some prayer and some singing and some call and response going on, and 23 pastors from around the state were arrested that day. And they're still dealing with the legal implications of that. But I think the important thing to note about that is that there are many, many, many folks in Missouri right now who have said, whatever it takes, we're going to do this. We're going to make sure that all people in the state of Missouri have access to quality, affordable health care. And it doesn't matter what it takes. We're going to make sure that it happens. So we're hoping to build on that momentum. There hasn't been anything filed yet, as far as I know, for bills coming up in the upcoming legislative session, but I know that Faith Voices and our allies from around the state, the Medicaid Coalition, and lots of folks will be at the Capitol from day one, making sure that things are moving forward with Medicaid expansion. And I would just add one more thing. You know, at the time that the Affordable Care Act was passed, so many people across this country rejoiced because they were going to be able to have health insurance for possibly the first time in their lives or in their adult lives. And that has become true for people all over the country, except in states where the legislatures have refused to expand Medicaid. And so there are people who have fallen into what we call the Medicaid gap, where they could go online and purchase a plan from the marketplace, but they can't afford to do that. And because it was assumed that all states would expand Medicaid eligibility, there's no help for people. The subsidies don't start until your income is above 138% of the federal poverty level. So we have a couple 100,000 people in that gap right now. And these are not people sitting at home eating bonbons and watching TV. These are people who are working because they fall between 100 and 138% of the federal poverty level. And actually between 19 and 138%, because 19% is where an adult can be covered right now.
There was an interesting, a very powerful image at the Capitol the day that the Medicaid expansion failed. They lit 700 candles on the steps of the Capitol, and many people gathered, several hundred, and they indicated that this is the number of people who would probably die because of not receiving sufficient health care due to the failure of Medicaid expansion. So I keep that image in mind.
Talking about the poverty level, let's speak a little bit about changing the paradigm from minimum wage to livable wage. Minimum wage really is not something that I think any loving society would want to say, because you're saying this is the minimum that you can possibly get, and not necessarily that that minimum will even be enough for you to take care of yourself and your family. So the conversation has shifted from minimum wage to a livable wage. There are a few states who have in fact gone ahead of the federal government even and increased the minimum wage to $15 an hour even. I was watching a program from about Seattle, Washington, where they increased their minimum wage, and it dispels the rumor that by increasing the minimum wage, you're going to drive production down, you're going to put people out of work. That hasn't happened. One is because now the people that are working the livable wage jobs, formerly the minimum wage jobs, now can afford to eat in the same restaurants that they waiter in. So there is this scare tactic that if you raise the wage for low-income workers, that it's going to put a cloud on the economy. It's going to, just drive the economy down the ditch, and that is not true. What is it, and what can we do as citizens to help promote a livable wage in the state of Missouri?
Well, I think we need to change the way we think about workers. I think we need to think about the dignity of each and every worker and the fact that any person working any job for 40 hours a week should be able to feed their family, should not have to make a choice between food on the table or taking a sick child to the doctor, should not have to make a choice between rent and food. And all of those choices that people living in poverty are having to make right now are unnecessary choices, because we can treat workers in a dignified manner. We can pay workers enough to live on what they're making. And I think it's sort of a false choice that's been presented to us. And what you often hear is, well, if we raise the wage to $15 an hour, then you're going to be paying $10 for a Big Mac. Well, my first response to that is, as a person who cares about my brother and sister who work at McDonald's, if it means that those people can feed their families, then I should probably be willing to pay $10 for a Big Mac. But my second response to that is, I wouldn't have to. There's another piece to this puzzle. So the folks at the very top don't have to be making billions of dollars on the backs of the people who can't afford to feed their families. And as you said, if somebody who was previously making $7.50 an hour is all of a sudden making $15 an hour, that's a whole lot of money that's going to go back into the local economy that right now just doesn't, because people don't have any options to be able to shop or eat or do anything extra beyond what they need to absolutely survive right now.
I would like to add one thing, is I think it's important to change people's perceptions. And one of the places I tried on one of my younger sons, I asked him, I said, when a person makes what is presently the minimum wage, is not a livable wage, I said, makes $7.25 an hour, what do you think that person makes for the year, working 51 weeks out of the year, 40 hours a week? And I said, less than $15,000. He said, no way, Mom. And I said, and he pulled out his iPhone and calculated. He said, you're right. So that's the first perception, awareness. And the second one, building on Michelle, is just, I asked a group of teachers, I asked a group of teachers one time not that long ago, how do you think about the poor? And they thought about the poor in terms of many of them being lazy, unmotivated, not spending the money they do have in the right way. So I think we need to influence people's understanding of who are the poor and how they struggle, and the majority of people really do try to they work hard and try to be a part of the government. I mean, not the government, but try to be a part of the decision-making process that is open to them. But they're burdened. They're burdened by, I just heard a report the other day, they're burdened by just the need for food, the need for school, basic supplies for their kids, the need to pay the electrical bill. These are many anxieties that weigh on their hearts because they know that they're working hard, their children need daycare, and we're simply, so to really allow our hearts to get in touch with what is it like for these people who are poor, and therefore that might influence, we'd work harder, it might influence people in how they would choose to support the effort, the cause for a livable wage.
Well, the Lord said that the poor will always be with us, but it did not say that those who have means should not help. And so we are simply trying to assist those in decision-making positions to provide that helping hand. And sometimes, I think many times, people become very jaded when you think about the poor. But many of us are just one paycheck away from being poor. And so when I travel by the Samaritan Center and see the lines out there receiving food, it pulls on your heart to say that, and you see these people, and they're not lazy people. They're simply trying to take care of their families, you know. Another part of the living wage and the minimum wage is transportation. A lot of the poor do not have cars, so they depend on, you know, local transit in order to get to work, to get to the doctor's office, to go shopping. And so there is a group that has been working very diligently to address the local transportation issue, to extend bus hours and so forth. Michelle, you've been very active with this group. Tell us a little bit about that.
So a couple of years ago, Faith Voices, which was then Jefferson City Congregations Uniting, named as one of its priorities public transportation and making it better in Jefferson City. And a part of that task force sort of became what is now Citizens for JeffTran, which is a community-wide group that's people of faith, but also folks from all over the community and different service organizations who also see the need for improved public transportation in Jefferson City. And Citizens for JeffTran has worked really, really hard to bring about some awareness among the citizens of Jefferson City as well as our local city council to really the lack that exists in our current transit system. We found ourselves a couple times fighting off budget cuts. At one point, a cut that was going to be a couple hours in the middle of the day of all bus service. And the reality is that the folks who are making these decisions are so far removed from people who have to rely on a city bus for their transportation that they don't recognize how great the need is and how great the need is to improve and expand that service. So folks who are living in poverty and are out looking for a job, like you said, very often don't have cars for lots of different reasons, don't have a driver's license, and most low-wage jobs don't happen between 8 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the evening. And so folks are able to get a job, and often they're not able to maintain that job because they find that they don't have transportation in the evenings or on the weekends. If someone has to take a cab across town to their job, you know, it could cost them $12 one way, could end up costing $24 to get to and from work in one day. And for people who make what is currently the minimum wage, that's at least a quarter to a third of their daily pay, paid just to get to work. That's not including any taxes or anything like that. And so the struggle is very real for folks who are in need of transportation. We've made some success. We've been lobbying the City Council for a long time to set up a public transit advisory committee and ask them to include in that committee some stakeholders in the system. So people who actually ride and rely on the city buses, whether it's the fixed routes or the handy wheel service, and as well as business owners who have employees who rely on it, and different people around the community who really have an interest in making public transportation better, not just because it's necessary for us to provide that service for people in our community who need it because they're poor, but also because people need it for different health reasons, and people need it as they age further and stop driving. People need it in communities that just are interested in growing. Young people who are coming out of colleges and looking at careers now are looking at cities where they can get around on public transportation. It's become a thing for people to not want to own a vehicle. Yeah. So there's a lot of work still to do there.
Yeah. Paul Van Horn, a local advocate for transportation, indicated that he rode the bus and he was amazed at the amount of time it took for him to get to where he wanted to go. So you can't just say, well, I'm going to jump on the bus and I will be where I need to be within 30 minutes.
Right, right. I have a friend who is vision impaired, and sometimes he uses the Handy Wheel service, but sometimes he uses the fixed routes. And if he has a doctor's appointment and needs to go and pick up a prescription, just to get from the doctor's office to the pharmacy and then back to his house is about a 2.5-hour process. And for those of us who just jump in our car and drive wherever we need to go, it's never occurred to us what it means to spend 2.5 hours doing something that should take you 10 minutes, and how that impacts the rest of your life in so many ways.
And I think one member of our board made that explicit when he doesn't own a car, and he said that the service stops at 5:30 in the evenings, and he said, and there's no service on the weekends. He said, sometimes I feel like a prisoner in my own home, because it costs, like you said, Michelle, too much money to do the cab. And any place I need to go, I either have to rely on someone else or walk. And so I think again, it's a perception. We don't think about what you said at the end there, and think about how difficult it is to rely on the bus transportation. But at least let's make it as convenient as we can for the people who do need this.
Let's talk quickly about early voting. Faith Voices initiated a petition gathering, signature gathering, to replace early voting initiative on the ballot. Michelle, you were coordinating that effort. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the effort to put early voting on last year's ballot, or this fall's ballot, I guess, was an effort of a lot of different allies around the state who believe strongly that all people need to have access to the ballot box, that all people need to have more opportunity to participate in civic life, to be able to have their voice heard. There are lots of people who are unable to do that for many different reasons. Again, very often goes back to economic status, someone who may be working 2 different jobs and unable to get away, someone who has to take child to childcare, and lots of different events that happen in their day that keep them from being able to go and vote. What we often hear from people is, well, if they can't figure out how to get there, then they shouldn't be voting anyway. Well, the people who are saying that, again, are people who don't spend 2.5 hours to get their prescription from the pharmacy, and don't have to choreograph their entire day to use the public transit system to get a child to daycare and themselves to work, and then a child picked up and home. So lots of different reasons that people aren't able to participate, and we want to make sure that everybody has a voice in the system. So we circulated petitions with some allies around the state, and unfortunately we were short in a couple of the congressional districts. So that effort, that particular ballot measure did not get onto the ballot. But in the final days of last year's legislative session, our legislature passed their own early voting measure, which it would seem was very much in response to the citizen-led effort that was going on. There was language in the actual resolution that passed about how it would invalidate the citizen-led measure. So that one ended up on the ballot, and the one that we were working for, which was 6 weeks of early voting with 3 weekends of either Saturday or Sunday possibilities for folks right before the election. Ours did not make it. Theirs did, which was 6 days that ended on the Wednesday prior to the Tuesday of the election, which causes a lot of confusion and not a lot of extra opportunity for folks. It specifically prohibited any weekend hours. So what it would have done would have been to sort of write in stone that we could not do the very things that we know need to happen in order to get greater access for people to the ballot box. So it might have been a little confusing for folks, because what we were telling people at that point was, don't vote for this early voting that's on the ballot. And so we want to let folks know that that's still a very important thing for us to pass, but it needs to be done in the correct way.
And another part of that was that initiative that they placed on the ballot had to be funded.
Yes.
And so if it did not get funded, it did
Right.
not take place. It
Right.
would not take place. So there were a number of games being played unfortunately, by our legislature on the citizens of this state, trying to confuse the situation. One situation that Jefferson City will be faced with very soon here is Mayor Eric Strump indicated that he will not be running for re-election for mayor. And so Jefferson City will be electing a new mayor pretty soon. So here again, that is very important that the citizens of this community, if you're not already registered to vote, please make sure that you go down to the county clerk's offices and get registered to vote. You can have a voice in who will be the next mayor of Jefferson City. It is very important that we do get involved, and to say that your vote do not count, it's a fallacy. It is a fallacy. City government plays a tremendous role in your life. It impacts your life on a daily basis. So don't think that your vote do not count, because it does. People get elected in this community with less than 200 votes. That is amazing. I have 200 people. I can name 200 people right now. So your vote does in fact count, and we hope that you take it serious. So if you're not registered to vote, please go down to the Cole County Clerk's office and get registered. One other issue that has arisen not only in Jefferson City, but throughout this state, throughout this country, throughout the world, was the shooting in Ferguson, Missouri. And as a result of that shooting, people have in fact come out to protest. As we travel throughout the state, the NAACP sponsored a march from Ferguson, Missouri to Jefferson City. And as individuals travel from Ferguson to Jefferson City, one of the things that they indicated that they continued to hear was protesters against the marchers were saying, "We support law enforcement," as though the marchers do not support law enforcement. That is not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is we believe very strongly that law enforcement need to be held accountable for wrongful shooting, for unjustified shootings. Well, enough of my soapbox. This is a Christmas season. We do hope that you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we have been talking with Ms. Carolyn Soche, and she is with the Catholic Diocese here in Jefferson City, and Reverend Michelle Scott Huffman, and she is the pastor of Table of Grace Church here in Jefferson City. Again, we hope you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. God bless.